Hello and welcome to Campaign Connect On Demand. My name is Oliver McAteer. I'm the Associate Editor for Campaign US. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. Knowledge for breakfast, lunch and dinner. That's what we're serving up right here, right now. We have Johnny Horton. He is the Group Strategy Director at Virtue, which is the ad agency born out of Vice. Johnny, a pleasure to have you. How have you been? Before we dive into this wonderful piece of research, let's get candid about how you're feeling. How's your mental state been? What's going on?
It's good, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I've been good, it ebbs and flows, ups and downs week on week. I've found some new hobbies of baking bread and tie-dyeing, and
You're one of the bread ones.
I'm one of the bread ones. I'm one of those annoying people on Instagram sharing pictures of bread. And I've got a 15-month-old daughter, which has kept things entertaining, to say the least, of keeping her busy and not tearing apart the house while still trying to do the day-to-day job. So yeah, been an interesting few weeks, but I don't know. I feel kind of like I'm adjusting to it now. I think it's going to be hard to go back to life before when all this thing ends.
Yeah, I feel very cocooned in my bedroom here with no windows, which isn't as depressing as it sounds. Well, look, yeah, thank you for joining. Pleasure to have you. So Virtue, Vice, you've done a really great piece of research. It's called Scar Tissue, a very aggressive name. It's about predictions of long-term behavioral scars with regards to the 2020 recession, looking at Gen Z demographic. What's important to note is that this research was well underway before COVID-19, and you sort of tweaked it and rolled with the punches to reflect consumer behavior and predictions going forward. So before we get stuck in, let's sort of rewind the track and take a step back. Can you paint a picture of how the study came about? This was in the works a while before COVID. So what were you seeing about the global landscape that gave evidence to this impending recession?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, as you say, we started this project long before COVID-19 and the recession was even a word on anybody's lips back in the strange old times of 2019 when we went to an office and left our homes. We saw that a recession was likely on the horizon next 12 to 24 months. These are things that tend to happen sort of every decade, and sort of the hints seem to be out there that one was coming. So our plan was to get ahead of it, and started off with a research project looking to explore how different generations would react in the upcoming recession. However, obviously, before you know it, COVID-19 swept across the world, and with it, the next recession was here, and one that's likely to be the worst that we've seen in a century. So with that, a whole slew of other white papers came out in the world recommending brands how to behave during the recession. And, I think whilst we'd started on that track, we didn't want to add to the noise there. There's a lot of great research, and a lot of it says the very, very similar things. So we thought that, actually recessions, whilst they're challenging times for companies, they're also often a period of innovation and invention. And so, as new products are born or redesigned for the new reality, we thought it was worthwhile pivoting to something that would be much more valuable, which is helping brands understand these sort of long-term shifts that are happening in behavior so that they can make sure what they're creating is relevant for the next 2, 5, 20 years, not just the next 12 months.
Great. So let's get into how did you go about this research? I think it's worth just talking about that briefly because obviously context is king and queen. Mm-hmm. Can you paint a picture of the methodology, the sort of goals that you're trying to score with this? And also it would be good for you just to paint a picture of Gen Z too. I mean, we read about it all the time, these different demographics, but who is Gen Z right now?
Yeah. So Gen Z, so I think it's worth kind of saying how we got to this piece, and then I think that'll give us some context for Gen Z. So with this ambition in mind of looking what the long-term effects would be, I started reading a whole bunch of historical research and articles around long-term effects of recessions on that have happened in the past. And I found this really fascinating piece of research from Severin and Van Bentham that showed that if we face a recession during our formative years of sort of 16 to 22, it leaves these scars on us that we carry through life. So whilst during a recession, most of us will adapt our behavior, to kind of cope with the crisis. Once the economy recovers, we'll often go back to the way we were before. Whereas if we face it during these years, it fundamentally changes our behavior through life. And, as a millennial who faced the last recession around about these years, like that research definitely rang true. So from there, I started to explore what the scars might be for the generation who'll face the recession during these formative years this time around, which brings us to Gen Z, and particularly older end of Gen Z. So, Gen Z being the generation after Gen Y, and currently sort of 5 to 25 years old. So that kind of brought us to Gen Z and looking kind of what the long-term effects will be for them from this crisis. So in terms of sort of the methodology and how we came to this piece, I started looking at what are kind of the major shocks that are happening as a result of this crisis, and kind of came to four different routes to explore. The first being kind of the shutdown of businesses that happened overnight, and not being able to access some services that I think a lot of us take for granted. Second was the mass working from home experiment that brought on, that we suddenly started doing. Third was the COVID-19 health crisis that is inseparable from this recession. And then lastly is the staggering rate of unemployment, and obviously the very challenging job market that young people are facing. I mean, everybody is facing, but particularly if you think if you're graduating this year, coming into a job market that's filled with people with more experience and more on the line to lose is a scary prospect. So,
Good.
Sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say let's take our time and go through those. I just want to underscore what you were saying as well, because it is really important. We're not looking at knee-jerk behavioural reactions here. We're looking at the long-lasting effects and impact of this impending recession. And you do know in your research, I think it's really important to bring up that those who learned to drive during 1891 recession, when gas prices doubled overnight, are the ones that have continued to drive less and use public transport more. So these are the longer lasting sort of trends, which now we can move over to a new demographic. So let's dive in. So we're going to talk about your 4 pillars. Where do you want to start? You want to start with the insourcing?
Yep, let's start there. So let me jump through a few of these slides here. So I think we've spoken about some of these bits and pieces. So yeah, so as I was saying, here's the 4 routes that we looked at. And first up is insourcing. So the way that we looked at this research, so being part of Vice, we have access to an incredible amount of research, and Vice has its own proprietary research panel called Vice Voices, that conducts research for our editorial as well as commercial sides of the business. And so from that, we have this kind of wealth of cultural and societal research. So, using that kind of formed the bedrock of this, of looking at signals that were out in the world already, of kind of where this behavior was going and how these shocks would affect behavior. So with insourcing, a few signals we're seeing out in the world is firstly how-tos. The global shutdown has caused us to consider how we do things for ourselves when society and traditional supply chains stall. And Google searches for how-to have been skyrocketing, from maybe fun kind of time-passing stuff of like how to bake bread, how to tie-dye, to, more serious stuff of like how to cut your hair, how to keep looking good, which is, important when you're on Zoom calls all day. When places like that. I can tell. The second signal that we see out in the world is that Gen Z recognize the need to create their own destiny. And even before this recession hit, Gen Z had a reputation for being scrappy and entrepreneurial, whether it's making your own clothes or creating your own company. And the last signal that we see in the world is this acquisition of new skills that's going on. So this time for Gen Z hasn't just been about being on TikTok and watching Tiger King. They've also been acquiring new skills. So, as the classroom moves online, they're also learning extracurricular stuff to kind of enhance themselves. So, whether it's learning new languages or teaching themselves a new trade, that kind of thing. So I think...
sorry, Karen.
No.
I was going to say, so how much of this and how much of these new trends and patterns that you're picking up are new and very surprising versus just an acceleration of consumer behavior that was predicted that may have taken 2 or 3 years, that's just kind of turbocharged?
Yeah, so I think this one in particular, if we jump to kind of what we predict is ahead, is more of a acceleration of a behavior. So I think, we were kind of seeing this DIY attitude existing within Gen Z before. And I think, the shocks of this crisis has really just accelerated and also expanded this attitude. I think it's going to be more than impacting just bakeries and people making their own bread. Gen Z are going to start to demand far greater ownership or control of everything from, what they consume to also where they work. I think another output of this is Gen Z will be much less reliant on outsourcing that has blossomed in recent years, and choosing instead to do things themselves, or at least have some kind of stake in the process. And I think one thing that's been maybe like new and surprising for me is around education. I think with all this in mind, Gen Z are obviously going to place much greater demand on education from trusted sources to help themselves problem solve rather than having to outsource. But, I think one major shift coming out of this crisis will be probably traditional education institutions are going to have a massive change. I think when these students are at home, missing out on the campus experience and just subject to probably relatively average Zoom lectures, I think it makes the kind of pill of the cost of the American education system a hard pill to swallow. So, I think it's pushing them to find education from a lot of other different sources, whether that be YouTube or subscription services. But I think that will be a real big change.
Talk us through what that means for brands, because on paper, that doesn't sound too good. A bunch of consumers cutting out the middleman, doing things themselves, cutting their own hair so they don't have to get a hairdresser's, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it looks bad on paper for brands. What it actually means is they need to find new ways to connect the consumer.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think it's going to be a change, but there's obviously still a lot of opportunity, and it's not saying that brands are going to go away and people are going to start completely making their own clothes or that kind of thing. But I think there's a way for brands to play a meaningful role. So there's kind of 3 brand actions here that the initial thought starters. Firstly, I think allowing consumers greater control and personalization of their experience is going to be important, making them feel like they have a kind of role or a part of product creation. And, even doing stuff like IKEA, like at-home building that enables more control, or, we're already seeing it with designers like Reese Cooper, who was offering the pattern and material to make his kind of famous chalk coat at home. So that kind of like partly making stuff, maybe partly allowing people to make stuff at home. And I know, here you can buy pizza kits from Roberta's Pizzeria, and Shake Shack are doing like make your own burgers and stuff like that. So it can even be as simple as things like that, of giving people a bit more control. I think the second way, obviously, as we're saying, education is hugely important. And I think building a meaningful connection with this audience can be offering education to help them do some things their own, or at least have an appreciation of the process. I think kind of going back to that Reese Cooper jacket, someone from our team had bought the kit with the kind of ambition to make their own. I think they realized quite how hard it is to sew a jacket. And I think it's giving them a new appreciation for people who make clothes, and like a realization that, yeah, you should be spending, maybe $100 on a jacket. Like you shouldn't be able to buy one for $20 because, it means that people are not getting paid enough for their amazing skills. And lastly, I think an interesting space that's grown in the last few years, and this could really accelerate, is this something that felt a little shady, and there was a lot of fakes and stuff like that on eBay, to places like the Real and StockX really bringing that authenticity to it. And I think there's a great opportunity for luxury brands to remain relevant and take control of their own secondhand market, by offering resources for trading and buying used pieces. And I think that doesn't take away at all from, a luxury brand's value. In fact, I think it actually strengthens it, showing the longevity and the quality of the things that they create, can have 1, 2, 3 lives, and you don't always have to buy something new.
I think that's really interesting, and it brings us nicely into our second pillar, remote, because all of these changes can be made from anywhere in the entire world. That is what the pandemic has cemented.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think for me, this is probably one of the most fascinating, and this could be one of the most fundamental shifts, not just from a employment point of view, but also just from, where people live in America and how that completely changes the makeup of the country. So with that said, jumping into it, so the kind of 3 signals we're seeing out in the world. First is this urban exodus that's already started before this crisis. So, we, whilst millennials have notoriously driven the urban boom of recent years, they're already starting to chase this more kind of countrified existence. I think we're seeing, as the stats say here, the major cities in America are collectively losing more young people than are going there. And I think obviously the COVID health crisis that we've seen happen in major cities is only going to accelerate this trend, making places that necessitate close proximity to others and mass congregation, like public transport, offices, that kind of thing, that's going to feel uncomfortable for a while to come, and it's going to make cities a very strange place to be. The second signal is,
yeah, are you going to be leaving the West Coast anytime soon?
Yeah, no, I don't know. My wife is from Vermont, and I think she's always been kind of seeking that sort of more country existence, but it's always been tricky. She works in advertising as well, and I think it's been sort of a difficult thing of our life. And the same coming from the UK. Like, if you're not in London, it's hard to find the job that you want to do, and so you kind of end up being in cities. And now the thought of it opening up to be able to be that you could do your work from anywhere, you could move to Montana or, a farm in the Pacific Northwest. I think it's really exciting. There is always going to be people who love to be in cities, but it means that now people who are mountain people or ocean people or that kind of thing, that those people can also work, in fields where they had to be in cities before. And I think it will make the makeup so much more interesting of companies and bring that diversity of different mindsets, different backgrounds, different kind of people into organizations that before probably it was more difficult to do that. So I'm really excited to see where this one goes.
That is the nugget, this whole thing, isn't it? It's like it will lead to greater diversity of talent, because it doesn't matter where you work anymore. I'm having the same conversation with my wife. She works in advertising too. She's from a deep part of New Jersey, but we pay a silly amount to live in Jersey City to have a nice view of Manhattan that we don't need to go into anymore. So this changes everything. We're like, why don't we just operate from San Diego? I don't know. It's like it's thrown a massive spanner in the works, but it's really interesting, and I think it's very positive. So sorry, I went off, but you've got some more stats on the work from home, which I think is really important.
Yeah. No, I think it's, I think this is one of the most important conversations to have right now. So the second signal we're seeing, obviously, this kind of big work from home experiment. I think, working from home, I think I was reading before, something like only 5% or maybe even less of the workforce in America was working from home, more than not. And now, we're at like 50+% of the workforce working from home. And I think whilst there's always been these kind of myths of it being less productive or, less creative, I think we've all managed to show that those are completely untrue. And I think at the same time, it's also given us a taste of, life with no commute, extra time with loved ones, extra time to do what we want, and the kind of flexibility that working from home has. Obviously, there's dangers that come with that work never stops, and we can end up putting in far more hours. But I think as we learn to separate work from, our home life better and kind of designate kind of specific behaviors for I'm entering the office now, 6 p.m. I'm leaving the office now, then those will get better. And I importantly, bringing this back to Gen Z, is that even before this crisis, we've seen that they're very comfortable being alone but connected. So this generation, whilst they might be on their own, are not feeling lonely because they're either chatting with friends on social media, messaging, texting, or gaming online, and feeling that connection. Their kind of urgency to learn to drive and buy a car that we felt as youth is not felt by this generation, because they can escape and connect with people simply by going on their phone or on their computer. So I think kind of bringing those sort of three signals together, as we're talking about, it's going to be really interesting what's ahead. I think firstly, it could be fascinating to see if, Gen Z may be never urban, whilst, our generation after graduating kind of rushed to cities for those jobs. Gen Z may see the benefits of living life outside of a city, lower cost of living, more space, less stress. With the sort of flexibility that we predict they'll demand from employers in terms of schedule and location, I think it could be fascinating to see how that grows.
What does this mean for in terms of, do you feel like loads of random places are going to be gentrified? Like you're going to have Starbucks and like real Gen Z focused brands opening physical presence in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it could be truly fascinating, like how that changes the makeup of America. I think it's often criticized of this kind of like coastal elite, and would be really interesting just to see different demographics just spread all the way across America and completely change the makeup. Going back to talking about Vermont, I think a big problem that they have at the moment is there just aren't that many white collar jobs for young people there. And suddenly, if people can move to all these more rural places, one, it brings more money to the economy. It brings more young people to hopefully, revitalize different places. It brings different points of view and aspects, and also like brings people together and causes different people to interact with each other, and not necessarily not to say like these places will be gentrified, but just that people from different backgrounds, it's like more easy for different people to mix, and I think kind of help that divide, which can be really interesting.
So talk about what brands have to do to reach this next level. It brings us on to your next slide, because you're talking about, to have this new world that you're talking about, we need to rethink the infrastructure, and this involves a lot of heavy tech implementation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think like importantly here, just like a point to make is that, one of the challenges of leaving cities is that the kind of chaos and densities of cities have often been credited with driving innovation and creativity. I think that's definitely true. You have this melting pot of all these different people in close proximity. And as more people work remotely, like that cultural exchange is going to need to happen more online. So, we're already seeing the metaverse start to exist with things like Fortnite and their Travis Scott experiments, and, Animal Crossing, and what the new internet could look like of this world of avatars. And I think, digital museums, forums, cultural meeting places will have to become those sort of crucibles of new ideas and will become even more critical. And I think that could usher in new types of social networks that are much more two-way and participatory. Things like Fortnite, things like Snapchat, that's a bit more back and forth, versus like just an Instagram that's a bit more projection. So I think, as you say, jumping into what the brand actions are here, I think first and foremost, as you say, infrastructure to more remote and rural places is going to be critical. So whether that's things like 5G or making sure that fiber optic is covered everywhere across the country will be essential for the success. Making sure that people can have these connected conversations and experiences, is going to be really, really important for making this work. And secondly, kind of to that point, is connection to culture. I think brands can play a really big role here in helping helping people stay connected to culture. So whether that's creating forums, offering people to be connected to cultural institutions and that kind of thing. So bringing those sort of cultural spaces that existed only in person before more into the digital world. And then, I think a third way is obviously like shops and e-commerce is going to be even more essential. I think making sure it's a frictionless experience and competitive shipping and return policies is already table stakes. But I think bringing this aspect of augmented reality or virtual reality into the equation will allow brands to either showcase products or goods before people make a purchase, which one, allows people to engage with a product much more deeply like they would do in a store physically. And two, should help reduce kind of shipping and return costs if people already kind of have much more of an experience of how something's going to look. So yeah, I think.
Do you have any insight into the tech adoptions that brands are going through right now? I mean, we've all gone to the South Bys and the tech conferences, the CESs of the world for the past few years. It's always, I don't want to say gimmicky, but the tech on display there, it looks great, but then you never see it actually being adopted, and the adoption rate is really slow. Do you see many brands at this time accelerating that and saying, we will try this, we will experiment with AR and VR where we haven't before?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be essential. Like the longer this thing goes on, the more necessity brands are going to see to start to employ some of this technology. I think we're already starting to see hints of it in the world, particularly, with furniture companies allowing you to sort of digitally place furniture and stuff around your home. I think fashion is a space that will really need to catch up with people being able to kind of virtually try stuff on. But I think, we're already starting to see more people looking for that kind of technology and definitely a acceleration of it.
Good. Let's move on to the third pillar, a really important one, a spicy one for us, health. I say that because we're both from a land where it's free, as it should be. So talk to us about how health plays a role here.
Definitely. Yeah. So our third one we've called Health Check. And I think this is particularly relevant for the US market. I think our other three signals can pertain to a lot of different places around the world. I think this is very specific to the States. And yeah, as you say, a very spicy one. I think you put it well, but the kind of three signals we're seeing here. Firstly, the cracks in the health system have been laid very bare, and this recession, as we said up front, is going to be inseparable from the global health crisis from COVID-19 that's caused it. And I think what is the scary fact that as Americans, we pay the most per capita for healthcare, and yet we've had the highest number of cases and the highest number of deaths from COVID-19. And that's a stat that's not lost on Gen Z by any means. And I think, this health crisis has only made the kind of strains on the strains and the inequality in the healthcare system laid bare. And even before the crisis, we were. Sorry?
I said it's even making me angry, and I'm just a millennial.
I know, yeah. But and I think even before this crisis, we saw Gen Z, whilst they're only really getting to an age where I think you probably start to worry more about the healthcare system and how you're going to pay for it. I think you're probably relatively protected about that up until a certain age, but they've seen their Gen X parents be hit with unexpected medical bills and the strain that's put on households. So, whilst they might not have been directly affected the last few years, they've seen their family go through it. The second signal we're seeing is this distrust in institutions. I think if we look at the last recession caused by the banking failures, it massively eroded our generation's trust in financial institutions and the government and everything else. And I think looking at data from Gen Z, they already had very low trust in institutions, like pretty much zero trust in institutions for the majority of this generation. And just as with the last recession, like this is likely to further undermine any remaining trust that they have, particularly in the kind of broken healthcare system. And the last signal, which I think is incredibly important, is despite all of this, health and wellness is a top priority for this generation, of utmost importance. As we see here, 88% saying that it's very important for a good quality of life, but only 8% feeling like they're achieving it. So I think there is this massive gap between their aspiration and what they're managing to achieve. So they're looking for help for how to get there. And I think that is really important of showing like just how critical health is to this generation.
So what does that mean for the future for this generation?
Yeah, so I think firstly, kind of looking at what's ahead. As I was saying, just as how Gen Y turned away from large banks after the last recession, Gen Z are likely to question and turn away from a broken healthcare system. But I think what is worrying about this is skepticism and reluctance to engage with a for-profit healthcare system could have dire consequences and continue to decrease life expectancy across the US. So I think on one side of the coin, that's like a very scary consequence, that people lose even more faith in doctors and choose not to visit. I think, something that could be very interesting about this is bringing the kind of pseudo wellness trends or pseudoscience wellness trends of the 2010s into sharp focus. I think we expect wellness to revert from a luxury hobby into a core necessity for Gen Z, and for them to be much more pragmatic and kind of less spiritual, less of a luxury hobby about this. Another is just as after the last recession, it spurred a lot of fintech and kind of new growth in kind of finance technology. Hopefully this crisis will ignite more innovation in the medical sector with things like virtual health and other technology helping to make healthcare more accessible. We're already seeing things emerge in the world. I think One Medical is an example, and even apps like Calm and Headspace making meditation and mental health much more accessible. We expect to see a lot more of that. And then
too, sorry, I just want to kind of throw in there that, from where I stand, we have a big kind of bird's eye view of the industry at large and the sort of agency makeup, especially when it comes to the holding company, which are normally broken into three pillars, which is media, creative, and health. And health, since this whole thing kicked off, the health arm of many holding companies has been the one that has helped the agencies stay afloat and lead the charge. And that convergence of creative, media, and health within the agencies is changing the brand messaging as well of their clients. So I think it's important too to kind of note that this is going to change the layout of agencies within big holding companies, and you are going to see greater consolidation across media, health, and creative to power brands. I think that's really important to note. Yeah.
And I think that will be a great shift, right? That change and bringing those aspects closer together. And then lastly, I think a really important point here is that with all that being said, there's only technology and innovation can only help so much if there aren't fundamental changes to the complex and expensive healthcare system that we have in the States. We see Gen Z has a near universal, I think it's like 98% of Gen Z believe in equality for all. And as we saw on the last page, with health being such a top priority, I think a big prediction here is that Gen Z will vehemently advocate for universal healthcare system that's accessible for all. I think, that's going to be a huge topic. It's going to be so interesting what happens in the election this year of kind of how that topic shapes the conversation. But, I think we can't carry on the way that we are, and just allowing more access and more equality in the healthcare system is going to be a really critical conversation point for this generation.
Good. So what does this mean for brands? How should they capitalize on this?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. Obviously, health is sometimes a tricky space for brands to get into. So I think here there is as much kind of things to do as an employer as there are things to do as a kind of commercial entity. So the first thing here is, I think, be very transparent about the health benefits you offer, attracting talent to companies. It's going to be a huge way to attract kind of top tier talent about offering the best health benefits. And I think doing things like bridging the gap in the healthcare system as much as possible, and considering how to offer important benefits like mental health support, so spanning more than just kind of your standard healthcare, but actually offering like a really broad range of ways to improve health of your employees. I think second really important aspect is being that voice of change. Corporations have huge sway when it comes to the health system and insurance policies. They are obviously the people buying those policies. So pushing for reform and access for all is going to earn the trust of Gen Z. We're already seeing things like this start to emerge with Amazon and JP Morgan, the discussions they've been having about how to reform the healthcare system. And I think those conversations are only going to accelerate. And then last on that point of kind of pragmatic health, so moving away from the sort of pseudoscience wellness trends and cutting through the bullshit by offering robust evidence-backed solutions that improve health. And, I think importantly, thinking about this beyond just physical health, I think health is very, very broad, and including emotional, cognitive, and social well-being is also critical. So really expanding the view of what health means and kind of offering support for a better health across all those areas.
Great. I mean, this bleeds really nicely into your fourth and final pillar, which is the work-life balance. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but I have very strong feelings that if you're the kind of person that, was it clocking in at 9, leaving at 5, and living for the hours after, then you were in the wrong job anyway. So for a lot of us, we're working around the clock because if you're lucky enough to love what you do, then that's what you do. So what's happened now is a nice cementing of this is it. This is, you have your life and your work, and it is fused, and that's that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this, again, is a really important aspect. I think you'll see between these kind of different routes and signals, there's a lot of overlap and kind of how different things come to layer. And, I think this and combining with the remote aspect is going to create a lot of interesting things in the future. But to get into the signals that we're seeing out there, as we discussed up front, if you're a student finishing college this year, not only did you not get a graduation, but you are entering one of the most challenging job markets, I think, in any living memory. And, as we said, you'll be competing against not just other graduates, but people with a lot more experience, with a lot more on the line of, having to pay for mortgages and having to pay for childcare and all those kind of things. So just as we saw in the last recession, leaving scars on Gen Y, I think there's going to be a massive impact for Gen Z here. And the rate of unemployment is already double of the last recession. So it's quite scary what this means for new people trying to enter the job market, let alone people who have been made unemployed trying to find new work. I think it's
really interesting because I don't know if you felt this too, but I think for the past 6-7 years working, I think I've been in an environment where a lot of people have expected a lot of their employers in terms of quick promotions and a lot of pay rises, and the expectations have been high and high and high. Do you think that is going to be wiped out now? Do you think the slate is kind of cleaned and you can't really go into a job situation expecting a massive salary?
Yeah, I think it might change on the employer side, but I think it might also change on the employee side. Things that we're starting to see that this crisis has driven is a bit of a reframing of what actually matters to people. I think, whilst they've had this extra time at home, either with their families or, to get back into doing things that they love. I think maybe people are recognizing that perhaps they were dedicating too much of their life to work. I think coming from Europe, as yourself, like something that's really interesting about the States is what a big part of identity, what you do for work, is. When you meet someone new, probably the second question after they ask what your name is what you do for work. Was I think in Europe, and particularly continental Europe, places like France, that would be considered incredibly rude, and you're way more than what you do for work. And I kind of feel like a lot of people I've been speaking to are maybe starting to sort of question that grip that what they do for work has on their identity. And I think that plays a big role in our prediction here. So, the second two signals that we're seeing with this younger generation they don't want work to define them. You know, as we're showing here, only 5% say what they do for work. Only 8% of their kind of economic standing defines what they do. And they have a desire much more to be defined by their passions and their values and what they choose to do kind of outside of work. And then last thing else I'm saying of kind of people reconnecting with things that matter. For this younger generation, having a really strong connection with friends and family is kind of the number one critical thing to them. And, you know, we've seen people spending time in this crisis reconnecting with people they haven't spoken to in a long time, either picking up new hobbies, as we were saying before, or finding time to do things that they love. So I think bringing those three things together is going to be really interesting what that means for the future of work. And I think, you know, with us being at home more, having that sort of, you know, the kind of temple of the office, you take that away, and I think people allow themselves to be defined by more. So a few predictions for the future here of what we think. You know, I think firstly, this COVID crisis has exposed, whilst good sides of business, has also exposed some of the dark sides of business and neglect for employees. You know, people like Everlane making a promise not to let any people go, and then a couple of days later, like firing like a significant portion of their workforce has probably cost them, you know, it's a PR disaster and cost them probably a lot of customers as well. And so I think that kind of demand, you know, we were seeing what's the one thing that you want a company to do in this crisis? And the answer was look after your people. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. Companies are going to have to keep being a good citizen, both to retain employees and to retain customers. Second, you know, I think here, as we're saying, this kind of feeling of job and income insecurity driven by massive unemployment is likely to push Gen Z to prioritize jobs for security and stability over wealth and passion, just as it did with the previous generation with the last recession. You know, I think we saw from the last recession, Gen Y, as a result of that, push back major life choices like buying a house and starting a family because they had this kind of fear of instability. And I think, you know, we're likely to see that again for this younger generation. Just as I was saying before, I think one of the most interesting aspects will be to see if this crisis breaks this grip of what you do for work on your identity of younger Americans, and if they'll start to look elsewhere for passions and things that define them. This may mean putting less emphasis on work, kind of as you're saying, are people going to be seeking those big promotions, or are they going to be as, you know, will it make them as happy to get those big promotions, or is there actually other aspects that the employer can do to get happy employees, like offering time for family and personal growth and hobbies, and giving people that aspect of kind of their life balance becomes more important rather than kind of racing up the corporate ladder.
So going into your point, how does it change the makeup of companies of the future?
Yeah, so I think there's a few ways that you can sort of shift your company for this future. The first is doing good business, and I think, you know, as we're saying on the previous page, if you don't already, it's critical that you start treating your employees like a true stakeholder, being transparent about how you support them. Because I think otherwise you can expect both employees and customers to go elsewhere. You know, there is, it's too easy to know companies that treat people badly. And I think people have too much intention to kind of choose both where they work and both where they spend their money with people that look after people well. So I think that, for one, is critical. I think a second aspect is allowing this time for side projects and upskilling. You know, as we're saying, kind of happy employees are more effective workers, and I think offering them time to kind of carve out space for passions and continued learning outside of their job spec is going to be a way to recruit best talent. And you know, we see some companies do this already, and I think if it's incubated correctly, it could be a great way to create new businesses or brands or products by kind of fueling those passions. And the last aspect is this kind of refocus on family. You know, we see family and those connections are utmost important for Gen Z. And I think, you know, for older generations, being at home with loved ones has given them a time to refocus. You know, I think for myself, you know, as I was saying before, I have a 15-month-old daughter, and normally, I'd leave the house at 8:30 and I'd get back at 7:30, and I'd get an hour with her a day in the week. And right now, I get 3 hours in the morning before I start work, and I get 2-3 hours in the evening, and it's completely changed. How I see things, and all those times I was sat in the office toiling away at something, I think it seems so stupid now, when I could have been at home with her and carved out time, carved out some other time, maybe after she goes to bed, to do that work. So I think putting family first is going to be really important, and having things like, really good paternity and maternity leave, like six months being comparable to places like Europe, is going to be, again, a critical tool for recruiting that kind of top tier talent.
I don't expect you to speak on behalf of the company, but what's going to happen with you personally with regards to how you're going to operate work-wise going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. The conversations have been ongoing. As you can, I can't speak for what the future will be, but I have to say I will find it really hard, the thought of going back to normal. I think a lot of us have managed to prove we can get great work done. In fact, I actually feel like I've done the best work of my career the last couple of months, being at home and being able to really focus, and probably having that time away. Right? I think it's like, I feel like all these myths of working from home have been completely kind of blown away. And I find it very hard to work in the office. Like, I can't speak for everyone, because I know there are people on my team that can't wait to get back because they really like that environment. But I work in the LA office, and the rest of my strategy team is in Brooklyn. So I'm kind of always remote anyway at the moment. And I find the office such a distracting environment that just being able to have this kind of space for kind of clarity and silence, and being able to be with my kid more, is, I find, inspiring. So hopefully I can continue to do that, because I think I've been more productive and having better ideas being in this space. How about yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, Campaign US, obviously Campaign is a big global brand. We're in multiple markets around the world, like Vice and Virtue. Campaign US was always a small brand. We were kind of late to the US market. We've been here about 5-6 years now. And the makeup is pretty small. We lean on global resources, but the main physical presence is myself and the editor, Lindsay Stein. And we were already working in a very remote capacity, sitting down and meeting agencies and working out of the agencies, going into the office every now and again, working at a coffee shops in between meetings, working from home. So this is nothing new. I guess I've realized, like 3 months into it, I started to realize how much I lean on meeting new people. And that's the only thing that I find hard with virtual, because I've met new people. This is the first time that we've probably met. But it's just not the same as sitting down and sharing a coffee, sharing a beer, sharing a glass of wine. Those sort of old school journalism, wheeler dealer ways of working are going to change. And I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on people like me to build their contacts and their contact list. So, it makes your energy refocus to, making sure that you're building out your online presence loads more. So we're being very experimental about how we're going about our online presence as a personal brand, but as Campaign US too. So it's changing a lot of things. To answer your question, I think it's going to be a good mix. I like to have a base, because I like to go around and talk to people. I like to be in the city and meet loads of people. I don't think that aspect of it is going to change, but I'm going to be working from home a ton more, because I've wasted so many hours commuting. I'm way more efficient. So I think it's going to be a bit of a balance. So look, Johnny, thank you so much for taking us through this research. Just to conclude, let's zoom out and let's look at the whole piece. What would you like brands to take away?
So, I think what's really important to recognize here is that the scars from this crisis and recession they're going to be really deep, and they're going to be wide ranging, and there's no escaping from that. And it will create significant changes in behavior like we haven't seen before. So I think inaction is not an option, and it's really important to get ahead of these trends and adapt your business to survive. But I think first and foremost, and something, as you say, I think if we zoom out and look across all of these things, I think the things that is really critical right now is authenticity and transparency are going to be really key. People need businesses to step up and support and be human and play like a meaningful role. You know, I think there is not space not to do that anymore. So I think if you look across all of these areas, that's like one thing to adapt for your business, and allowing people into to your business and kind of feeling more a part of it, I think is going to be critical.
Good. Well, look, Johnny, is there anything else that you want to add whilst we have you?
No, I think that's everything. I think I've really enjoyed being able to share this with everybody. Hopefully it's valuable and useful. And, I think one thing for us is that obviously this is just the start of some predictions. We're going to keep tracking this. There's some other areas that we want to dig into around education and how retail will change and travel as well. But we also very much welcome people's feedback. So, if this has struck a chord with you, or, if you have any provocations and that kind of thing, we would love for you to get in touch. You can find us at virtueworldwide.com and email us at us at virtueworldwide.com. And yeah, please reach out and share your thoughts, because I think if this crisis has taught us anything, it's that we're better through collaboration and working together and sharing ideas. And, I think we can build, kind of the new future together by continuing to build on this sort of work.
Good. Well, look, Johnny, thank you so much on behalf of Campaign US and the whole global team. Thank you for sharing this really important research. To the audience, thank you for watching. Please do, as Johnny says, get involved with the conversation. You can be tweeting at us and do use the hashtag Campaign Connect. You can now leave and go back to the hub, where you'll find loads more content within Campaign Connect. But thank you for being here. Johnny, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. Take it easy.
Cool. Thanks, man.